I watched the film, really enjoyed it. Thanks for doing that. Holy shit.
Doesn't happen very often, does it?
Yeah, well, I mean, what did it feel like to kind of resurrect this thing and re-explore, and how did this happen?
Well, for me, the resurrection part is, I can't tell you how sick I am of this movie. Not his movie, but Beaver Trilogy.
Yeah.
I mean, we started thinking about it. It's been 36 years since I met him in the parking lot. And it's been a part of my life almost every day since. You know, in the remaking of the film and the dramas that went along with it and the, you know, re-establishing a contact with him years and years later, and then what proceeded to happen after that, clear up until his death. And it just doesn't stop. And here we are 36 years later, we're still talking about it. It's been a constant in my
Fucking
life.
nightmare.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's been a nightmare. And then this guy comes along and stirs it all up again.
And it's been a true dream.
It's one man's nightmare is another man's dream. That's the lesson.
It really is a dream.
Well, yeah. How did how did this iteration happen?
Trent's actually a pretty well-known Salt Lake City filmmaker, and I think, you know, when I was a kid wanting to be a filmmaker, I couldn't help but realize that, you know, Trent's a guy that's making films, and I definitely want to be that guy. Yeah. I didn't realize that I was going to make a documentary about him, but here we are.
He came into my office and said, you know, I'd like to make a little documentary about you. And I said, sure. And I figured he'd come in and talk to me for about 20 minutes and it'd be over. Because other people have done that before. But he just kept coming back and back. And he kept showing up. I'd be in Cambodia and there's Brad. Oh, Brad's here. And then I'd be in London and it's, oh, Brad, hi. And so he's a persistent fellow. Yeah. The neat thing about Brad's film is that there's so many things in it that I didn't know. You know, he went back and investigated. He's a good little investigative journalist. He went back and talked to those people in Beaver that I'd never met. And watching the film, I ended up learning a lot of things that I didn't know. It was a pleasant surprise and a good film.
This story is so strange because it was remade so many times, and the layers that it added and the things that it hid and the things that it showed are kind of, you know, they're all over each other, you know, and it's kind of like sometimes you're showing something with a camera and sometimes you're hiding something. So I guess my question is, yeah, how do you stay innocent as a filmmaker, and how do you recognize the artifice entering into the process?
So many times in a documentary, for instance, what you do is you sit down and you talk to people and they talk about something that's happened in the past. You know, I did this and I did this, and then you put the still pictures up and the banjo music, stuff like that. But if you can actually catch something happening right on camera, that's, you know, I've probably made well over 100 documentaries. That's only happened to me maybe twice, 2 or 3 times. So it's and if you get it and hold on it and realize that something is happening, it's a very rare moment, and it's what makes a movie good. It's the moment that you live for as a documentary filmmaker. So at that point, you're not adding any artifice to anything. You're just trying to get out of the way. Just get out of the way and let it unfold. And also, don't try to hide the fact that you're there. Don't try to hide the fact that there's a documentary film camera filming this guy. I mean, that'd be absurd, because there really is one there. So it's artifice to pretend that there's not a camera. Like, for instance, with this camera, it would be never look into the camera, whatever you do, because then they'll know there's a camera there, right there. See, it just drove the cameraman crazy.
And I think that moment in the parking lot really is one of the most special things. I mean, it's just it captures so much in such a small amount of time, and it's something that's it was really relatable for me, you know, because I had a dream about being a filmmaker, and I could see that the dream was similar in a way. So
that the kid had the same dream.
The kid had the same dream,
yeah.
and the kid had the same dream as probably a lot of people, and I think a lot of people could see themselves, even if they weren't dreaming about being Olivia Neutron-Bomb, they had that dream, and it's kind of a naive dream, and you can't help but, you know, see yourself in that.
Well, go ahead.
I think that's why it's it's withstood the test of time, and that's why that keeps going over and over.
Well, also the thing where the Beaver Kid is putting on his makeup in the mortuary. Now that is a moment that you just don't get very often. The fascinating thing about that is the subtext of what's going on. He is saying one thing, but we are reading something completely different, which is, that's good writing. If you can write that well, you're lucky. Like catching lightning in a bottle. It's not something you can go out and create. It just either happens or it doesn't. Yeah.
Did you feel like you were catching lightning in a bottle when you were interviewing him, or that you had that, you felt that?
Well, you know what, I mean, to be honest, I always thought of Trent as this kind of like really iconic filmmaker. So I go in there with like, a little bit terrified of, asking the wrong things. And it probably was about 10 minutes until you said that you didn't want to talk about the Beaver Trilogy.
That's the only thing I will not
I'm not talking about all they do is they sit me down and they talk about the Beaver Trilogy, and then I was like, well, can we sit down and talk about the Beaver Trilogy? Please, can we do this now? Oh, God.
It's like, get the fuck out of my office.
Oh, this is horrible.
What do you guys think is the defining difference between narrative and documentary, and do you think that's changing?
I go back and forth continually.
Yeah.
And so to me, they're just making films. It's filmmaking. I'm not sure. It's an interesting question that, quite frankly, I haven't thought about.
Yeah, I mean, this is the film to think about it, because you've got the documentary, you've got the remakes and the remakes. What was kind of interesting to me, and where I started to really look pretty hard at that first interview that we did with you, was that you were doing Luna Mesa, but there were some things that were, even if you were talking about Luna Mesa, it actually made sense for the Beaver Trilogy. And it was about trying to capture reality. But then when I went down to Beaver, I found that they were saying a lot of the same things, that the Beaver Kid was kind of having this difficulty discerning what was on TV and what was real life. And there was a lot of confusion, I guess, for him in that
Yeah.
respect, and that he was getting lost a lot in his daydreams, and kind of, pretty soon the daydreams became a reality and then became a nightmare. And
It's funny you bring up Luna Mesa. That goes back to the question you asked. Now I understand. Luna Mesa is a narrative film that I made, but it's a documentary at the same time. It's absolutely, because I'm documenting what happens to me as I go along, and I'm turning it into a narrative. So there is no, it's a very strange experimental film, but that's exactly what it is. It's a documentary narrative. It's made up, but it's real.
What are some lessons you learned, or what is the biggest lesson you think you learned while making this film?
I mean, the life lesson that I've been trying to continue to tell myself is to live in the moment. I don't know if the film actually taught me that or making the film taught me that, but to try and make sure we live in the moment and appreciate sitting here in this media room type of a thing.
Yeah. Do you guys have any advice for filmmakers starting out? Looking at this gigantic mountain in front of them. Any tools to cut away the foliage to their paths?
I have a little bit to say on that. It's not hard to make a film anymore. I mean, anybody can grab a camera and make a film. The difficult thing now is to break through the din and have anybody pay attention to it. There is so much out there. I remember I interviewed Patti Smith once, and she said, this is the era where everybody creates. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. And then the more I thought about it, I'm not so sure it's a good idea. There's just too much junk out there. There's too much junk. So how do you break through that din? And I don't know. I really don't have an answer to that.
Film festivals, perhaps? Is that part of it for you?
Oh, maybe, but even that's a din. How many, I don't know how many films I've got here, 300 or something. I mean, you'll never hear of 290 of them again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
And it's not that they're not great films, it's just that there's too much out there.
Is there an answer for that, or is there a solution to that? Is it just everybody quit?
World War III, I think, maybe. No, I don't know. I've actually gone around and posed that question in a lot of different places, and anybody who thinks they know what's going on right now doesn't. I mean, that's the one thing that I discovered, is nobody knows how to deal with this thing that's happening. It's fascinating on one level, but yeah, how do you get anybody to pay attention to anything?
This is maybe like contrary to that, but going down to Beaver and talking to the sisters, I got a sense that the Beaver kid always wanted this, but he was constantly being told that he couldn't do that or don't do that. You can try it, but don't necessarily do it. And one of the things that they told me later on was that they wish they had just let him go and try it and do it. And early in my career at that same class, I asked Trent, how do I become a director? And he said, go get a camera and make a movie. And I think that still is pretty good advice. Because even if you fail, you probably, and as long as you were in the moment, it probably wasn't a failure. It might be a financial failure, it might be a film festival failure, but in the scope of life, it probably wasn't a failure. You probably learned a lot. You probably met a lot of people. It was probably a good experience. So I would say encourage everybody to do it. Just don't.
That's therapy, is what you're saying.
Sure, yeah. Just don't steal my audience.
Cool, guys. Well, thank you so much for your time, and good luck with the film. I hope that the buyers are coming in droves, and I'm sure they are, of course, because it's really
We
good.
thought you were going to.
Hot
You're
potato.
Not buying this?
Well,
I thought you were going to buy this movie.
Well, I'm lowballing.
What are we doing here?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thank you.